Hey, welcome to Wine Talks here with Paul Kalemkiarian, and of course you can get Wine Talks on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or your favorite iTunes station. And this episode is brought to you by the Pure Wine Club from the Wine of the Month Club, 48 years of curating wine for its members. And the Pure Wine Club is its latest edition featuring biodynamic and organic wines. Today, though, we are graced with the presence of Umberto Cosmo. Is it Cosmo?
Cosmo, yes.
But it says doctor here.
Yes, because my previous studies were related to animals, and then, we were producing milk in our family farm. But you grow up, and from milk you switch to wine, and that's why.
But wait a minute. But the doctor part was from school, obviously.
Yes, from school.
So a PhD in
veterinary studies, animal studies in general.
Wow, that's so interesting.
For the production, especially linked to the production, not the dogs, cats, something that. But not that I don't like dogs or cats. I have my house is full of cats.
That's so interesting. By the way, we're also joined by Bob Castellani from Specialty Cellars, one of the great vendors in the Los Angeles area of all things wine, as well as beer and stuff.
We used to have some artisan beer. That craft beer thing took off and kind of came down to earth now. So
I remember that.
We're focused more on the wine.
I remember that.
And I've been working with Umberto for, a dozen years or so?
Yes.
Yeah. So we
about a dozen years, yes, for sure.
Have been leading the charge to get his Proseccos in the market and out there across the country.
There's an interesting thing that I've peeled back on a lot of winemakers that have come through here. We do a lot of Italian, had our Sardinian winemaker in the other day, a lot of French, but one of the themes that I've come across, and you just stumbled across it yourself, which is they don't always start out in the wine business, nor did they aspire to be in the wine business in the beginning. Some have studied engineering, some were business students, masters in business school. I interviewed the winemakers at Trebecchieri. There were four of them. They had gone to med school, but ended up in the family business. So were you growing grapes there?
We were growing grapes since centuries with my family in the area, because my family fled Venice when Napoleon arrived back in 1700, end of 1700. So since then we has always been farmer in the family. As I told you, milk, eggs,
but
grapes,
farming animals and
grapes,
cultivating.
but also
grapes too.
Yes, we are in a hilly area, so cultivating grapes is essential, because we had some corn too, some other things. But later on, in the 80s, my father gave us the chance of buying some tanks, and with my brothers, we started to produce some wine, and it seems that is working.
So let's position the winery where, if I go visit Venice, how far does it take me to get to? How long?
Well, if you are in Venice, the most convenient is jumping on a train, and 40 minutes you are right in the middle of Prosecco Hills, the traditional area of Conegliano Valdobbiadene, where the Prosecco was born.
So that's a little bit east of the Veneto. Is it right in the Veneto?
It's right north of Venice.
Straight north.
Straight north.
So a little bit east of what would be Lake Garda?
Lake Garda is about 150 kilometers west of us.
Yeah. So now in this area specifically is Prosecco's area as far as sparkling wine.
Yes.
That's it.
Glera has always been our main grape, and sparkling wine production in the area dates back to the second half of 19th century. So about 200, more than 150 years ago.
That always fascinates me, because the California wine industry, I had a winemaker in from Monticello Vineyards, and they were like one of the first in 1969, 50 years ago, right? This big deal, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly. We're like
the
infants.
16th century, right?
Yeah.
So I think people want to know the difference, because we see so much Prosecco, we see so much inexpensive Prosecco around. There's the bottle of champagne downstairs, California champagne, and they're being sued by Gallo because the label looks like the La Marca label. But there's some very fine Prosecco, as yours are. Tell us the main difference between Prosecco and champagne, let's say, if there is a difference besides the grapes, and how is it that that you've stumbled across all this?
Well, I think that Prosecco is different from Champagne because of the grapes, because of the terroir, and because of the history. As well, it is different from the Moscato d'Asti, because it's another grape, it's another land, other people making it. So I think that every wine has its own positioning. You were talking about prices on Prosecco. It's quite funny because it seems that this is the main problem. I don't think so, because in every wine we see cheap wines and high-end wines.
That's true.
I think that Prosecco became famous in such a short time that people are not getting used on the difference between one winery and another, with one product to another. It takes time.
I think you're right. You're right on it.
Most people are buying entry-level Prosecco, the DOC versus the DOCG, this Prosecco Superiore.
I think that is something that depends on your priorities in life. Some people like to buy good wines. Some people like a nice pair of shoes. So
that's true. I think you're right. But Prosecco has a different. And this is my 30th year, tasting through and talking and selling things. And Prosecco's sort of newer. I'm not going to say new, but newer to the idea of sparkling wine than Champagne would be, even California sparkling. And there are so many inexpensive ones. I don't know that the general public has the understanding that there are some premium quality, complex, interesting Proseccos, not the least of which would be traditionally made Prosecco. I think most of it's Charmat or it's
even Charmat can be really a good, bottle of wine. It depends on where you grow your grapes. Coming from the Prosecco Superiore area, the Conegliano Valdobbiadene, hills are steep as in Mosel. So
did you hear him say that?
I can't pronounce Valdobbiadene and Conegliano.
It's longer than my last name.
And in every wine there are cheap wines and more expensive wines. Sometimes the range is 1 to 100. So
for sure.
Well, the difference in price isn't that much between a DOC or DOCG. The Superiore is just a few dollars more. It's
people should really take a chance in drinking the high-end Prosecco because it costs just a fraction of just a normal Prosecco. If you want the same difference in quality between two wines in another appellation, let's say Bordeaux, if you want to buy a good Bordeaux, you have to spend 10 times
that's
of a normal cheap Bordeaux.
Based on last night's tasting, that's
with Prosecco, you just have to add a few bucks. So nothing difficult.
That's an interesting point. So I think for the consumer, we should define then. We obviously grapes are different. So in Champagne, let's just use Champagne for now because it's well known. Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and those are the grapes they grow and they make it depending on the percentage. We move into Italy. We go to the north of Italy. We start making sparkling wine, and we're using what to do? What are the grapes of Prosecco? They're the main grapes of Prosecco.
The main grape of Prosecco is Glera.
Glera.
Yes, Glera. And it has to be a minimum of 85% of Glera.
It does.
Yes. But most of my fellow good producers tend to use minimum 95 with some part of some other old local grapes like Verdiso, Bianchetta, Marzemina Bianca,
but it can be anything if you want to be. It can be red even if you wanted to.
We are allowed really to use by the regulation some Pinot Noir.
Okay.
But we don't really like
Pinot
to use
Nero,
it.
as we call it.
Yes, we don't like to use Pinot Nero.
The Italian version.
Even Chardonnay is allowed, but that's used mostly for mass production.
So what I found fascinating about the wines, and Bob had brought me one last week, and I think this is a very important part of the sparkling wine education, because sensing the terroir in a champagne takes a little extra effort than it does in a still wine, and I think because of the bubbles. This is my personal opinion. However, in your wines, distinctively different amongst the 3 or 4 bottlings, and distinctively different character and complexity. And so now the consumer can start to sense the difference between one Prosecco to another when you taste like I just tasted. I don't think in general, if I go to the store and I buy a bottle of La Marca, whatever else is on there, I really care about that. Right? I'm just looking for the bubbles.
You just want fresh,
but
fruity,
Prosecco, I think that is so easy to understand and easy for the people. It's let's say more common version, that is the extra dry. That sometimes for most of big producer, it makes no sense to research in something different.
Yes.
We, as a smaller producer, he who loves his territory, he loves his appellation. I think that has to research for the history of of his wines, the wine that he produces. So that's what we started to do many years ago, almost since the beginning, by researching on what the origin of Prosecco were. I told you that Prosecco is a sparkling wine, and but who decided that Prosecco, that Glera, was suitable for making sparkling wine?
Yeah, who did do that?
Nature did. Yes,
really,
because Glera, we harvest Glera. I remember when I was a kid, we used to harvest Glera at even at the beginning of October. Beginning of October in our region can be quite cold.
Wow.
And being cold, if you don't have fancy wineries, and in 150 years ago, really, there weren't fancy wineries. They were very sensible to the climate. So if we had the wind, the cold wind coming from the Dolomites are a few 10 of kilometers north of us. The yeast, I always say that the yeast has a powerful union. So they don't like to work in harsh condition.
Yes.
And so they stop to work if the mast is too cold. So if you add that mast cold and less sugar, because the fermentation is going toward the end, this means that they stopped fermenting, while in the wine there is some sugar left.
Yes.
When since they didn't use to filter the wine at that time, so yeast remained silent in the wine with some sugar, but only because of the cold. During the springtime, it started to re-ferment.
Well,
and so that's why the bubbles, we used to find the bubbles in the wine. The real first wines that were born as sparkling wines in the area were born on these. It's the similar story to Champagne area.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So it was an accident almost.
Was almost an accident, but accident happens, and if you have some clever people working on it, you can obtain good results. And this was born, probably this idea, because we were lucky to have probably the first enological school in Italy. The first winemaking school in Italy was in Conegliano.
Really? Wow.
Back in the middle of 1800. As well as probably is the second oldest in the world.
That's all fascinating, and I love the story about. So somebody opened this wine that had re-fermented, basically.
Yes.
And said, wow, this is pretty good stuff.
I think that
it's got bubbles.
And they took the suitcase. They went to somewhere else, maybe Champagne.
Yeah.
To look what they were doing, and they came back with new ideas. They started to apply these ideas to our wines, and this is how Prosecco was born.
So I noticed that a couple of the wines that you brought today are made the traditional method, which is in the bottle, disgorged.
Yes, this is something that is part of our philological research in Prosecco, because you know that Prosecco is made mostly by Charmat method, so tank fermentation.
Typically, I think.
Typically is that one. Probably 99% is tank fermentation, is Charmat method. But we were asking ourselves, what were they doing before Charmat has been introduced in the area?
Sure. Because
the first Charmat fermentation has been introduced in 1930 by a big winery in the area. So between 1870 and 1930, how were they making sparkling wine? By bottle fermentation. And so we started to research that. It's not that bottle fermentation is better than Charmat. Both gives different results.
I agree.
I think that what is very important and what we discovered is that Glera is suitable for using both methods. Depends on what you want to achieve with your wine.
Sure.
If you want a sparkling wine that is easy to drink, that is pleasant, and you want to enjoy with your friends, the Charmat is perfect.
Sure.
If you want something that can pair with your food, you can use Metodo Classico or a Charmat with a longer rest on the lees. But depends on what you want to. It's not that one is better than another.
I agree with that. I've had many good Charmat in all parts of the world made sparkling wines, and I think you touched on it. If you are making it in the bottle, it has the potential to be more complex and some more flavors and more character about it, but it doesn't mean that either one is better than the other. In fact, I've had many.
Right.
I had the opportunity once recently to taste two wines, two different methods. One of them was I tasted a wine that was bottled at the same time in a cork, and one was bottled in a screw cap. It's a Chardonnay, and they were different. I wouldn't say one was better than the other, but they were definitely different. And then I also had the opportunity to taste an organically grown grape Chardonnay, and across the walkway is conventionally grown, same winery, same winemaker, same barrel, same everything. So I had the organic wine and I had the conventional wine. They were different. Not going to say one was better than the other. So I think that's an important part. But there was something very interesting about the wines we just tasted, particularly the rosé. Tell me about the terroir. And I find this is hard for me, even after all the wines we've tasted, to sense terroir in a sparkling wine. Except, boy, the complexity, particularly in that rosé, was really spectacular. What do we have in Prosecco to do this?
Prosecco in the classic area of the Prosecco Superiore, we started to introduce also differentiation between the different hills. So we have our hills are called nicknamed Rive.
Rive.
Yes, and we have more than 40 of these Rive in the area, and you can feel the difference in the soil, the difference in the exposition. You know, we are an old appellation that has been discovered very late, so we need to have people to know what we can really do, and so that's why we need to talk about these to explain that there can be a lot of differences between one Prosecco and another. Not that one is better and the other is
Umberto, are most of the producers farming on hillside fruit, or is it all from the
for
valley?
Conegliano Valdobbiadene is only hillside.
And that's
you are not allowed to plant in the plains.
But most of the DOC is
the
outside.
DOC, there is some part is hilly, but most of it is plains.
Gotcha. And one other thing that strikes me is the DOC Proseccos tend to have more sugar.
Not really.
No?
No.
Sweetness level.
The sweetness depends on the secondary fermentation, so it's a technical aspect.
So it's up to each winery to decide the style.
The disgorging, how much sugar you put in the...
Well, for our Metodo Classico in disgorging, traditionally as Bellenda, we work on a very dry side. So we have one zero dosage, so with no sugar added. Another one with 3 to 4 grams. And but now we are experimenting something that we thought it was being produced before World War I, where wines tend to be drinking with a higher level of sugar. Like in Champagne, they were using demi-sec at that time. So we are experimenting now a Metodo Classico of Prosecco made with 26 to 30 grams of sugar.
Wow. My favorite trivia question. There's two favorite trivia questions that I use when it comes to this sparkling wine. One is, what's drier, Brut or extra dry? And
you are right. This is really confusing because if you say a dry sparkling wine is really a sweet wine.
Yes,
because it's between 17 and 28 grams of sugar left.
Right, it's a lot.
And extra dry should be really dry.
It should be.
Is sort of fruity wine between 12 and 17 grams.
Right.
Below 12 is Brut, 0 to 12. But we have a nice section that I love a lot in the Brut that is called Extra Brut, and is 0
Extra
to 6.
Brut. Well, that's very dry.
Yes.
So here's what's happening in the consumer side, and I want to ask your opinion of this. I see you're doing some things sustainable for sure, and you're moving towards organic and all the rest of those monikers that are coming around because people are starting to ask.
Yes.
In fact, I started a club.
Yeah, right.
That's just
they
about,
have to ask.
Right. They have to ask. So keto. Now this is a internet. Marketing on the internet's like crazy right now. It's like the Wild West. Okay.
Yes.
So it's all about people, what they're searching for, and all these metrics that you have to understand. And we were doing some studies yesterday, and we found that the metric or the search term keto diet friendly wines. Okay, huge.
So keto diets?
Keto diet wine. That's
So
the people are looking
vegan
for. Okay.
Diet?
Yeah. So
It's
keto.
it's a type of diet.
Keto is a diet that
keto. Yes,
you
keto
you only eat
for
fat.
protein.
So no sugar.
No sugar.
Right.
Yes.
So I can now have a page on my website where I'm going to put all the wines in that have less than so many grams per sugar. I haven't figured that out yet because no one really knows what that means.
Yeah,
Except that it's probably in what the range you're talking about.
Hmm.
Probably less than 10 grams a liter. Then
Yeah.
that's going to be keto friendly because of that. So I think this is a wonderful thing because I'm looking at some of the levels of sugar here, particularly the two minted classicals.
Has about our Brut has 6 grams of residual sugar, and 6 grams of residual sugar means 1 teaspoon.
Yeah. So this is great.
Yes, but you have to drink 1 liter of wine
Yes,
to have
that's true.
a teaspoon. I think that your first coffee in the morning has more sugar than a full bottle of wine.
For sure.
And you don't drink a full bottle of wine.
No, not typically. Well, wait a minute. I had Monsieur Tétanger in here, and he's like, I drink 2 bottles of champagne every day. I'm
Every
like, wow,
morning
that's pretty
for
good. But and I'm going to lead in another point.
Yes.
I don't think that the general consumer, particularly in the West Coast of America, maybe on the East Coast, is more obvious. So certainly the wine lists at restaurants and the wine shops on the East Coast are much more versatile in the wines that they serve. I mean, particularly European wines. But I don't think that sparkling wine is part of the main consumption, daily consumption even of an American, particularly in the West Coast. And I think it should be. I think that sparkling wine should be part of the regime, if you want to call it that, of a regular wine drinker.
I think so, because having your meal with sparkling wine is really something
cleans the
really
palate.
nice. At home, it's normal for us to use sparkling wine. I know that in other areas they start usually with the red wine, and then they keep going on red wine. Sometimes they drink white wine, and they think about sparkling wine as just a wine for celebration.
That's right.
But I see that something is changing, and you know, we as a wine producer, we need to be patient, because producing a wine takes time, and we are patient with the market too.
Yes. I mean, I was thinking about sparkling gin. Maybe that'd be a good idea. So I see you have a nice diagram in your brochure here about the sustainability part of the winery. You don't use any weed killers.
No.
So that would almost be considered organic. And though I know you're looking at maybe getting certified for that. But what do you do in the vineyard? Do you use just natural?
We use natural products. We use no weed killers for fertilization. We use the byproduct of the wine production.
Yeah.
So
really? So
we
must and things.
Compost the
leaves,
the
pruning.
skins, and the.
I see. It says pruning.
The pruning we send to a plant where they produce energy from biomass.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes, because the pruning residual left in the vineyard can be the place where some insects that are not very good for the vines can develop. So we prefer to take out. But we compost the what's the name in the raspo?
The pulp?
I only know French.
The part yes, the part of of the grape.
Yes. Oh, okay.
Beside the stems.
Yeah.
We compost the stems together with the skins that are discarded after the pressing. We compost for a few months, and then we use to spread it in the vineyard.
Interesting. You know, they started in America. They started drying wine grapes for raisins, and I bought some because they were actually pretty good, but they had the seeds in them still, so it's like a crunchy raisin. So eventually, I hate to say this, but eventually the rats here. We had some rats. They kept
they found the raisins.
So we stopped selling them.
They're tasty treats for the rats. Yeah.
All right. So
also, water is the byproduct
do you need
by
to
water
irrigate up there?
when we no, we don't irrigate.
You don't irrigate.
I think that if you need to irrigate in a vineyard, you are not in the right place for planting a vineyard.
So that's all of California.
Well, yeah. I mean, Napa does some, but there's a lot of rain this year. I don't think that they're doing it. And certainly Bordeaux, you can't. Burgundy, you can't. Many parts of the world, you can't. But it seems like South America, you almost have to have some irrigation in some parts.
They flood irrigate quite a bit. The rainfall and the mountain snow comes down. And
I agree to the extent that the vines that tend to grow deeper and go find their nutrients, there's a clear difference in the complexity. And I think, and this is the part that is interesting to me, particularly for sparkling wines, is to then express that in a sparkling wine.
In sparkling wine, we don't need complexity. We don't need power.
Right. That's a good point.
In the juice, we need elegance.
Yes,
we need a good balance between acidity, sugar, and the different kind of acidities, because a sparkling wine production involves a double fermentation. So the first fermentation for making it a wine, and then making the wine into a sparkling wine, and this double fermentation adds complexity by itself. So if we start with the complex base wine,
we
will have an overpowered sparkling wine. And an overpowered sparkling wine is not pleasant to drink.
No, you're right. That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Like, I have many sparkling wines that just were too much flavor, too many things going on. And I think an important part that you just said was the acidity part, because many inexpensive Proseccos, Cavas, Champagnes, doesn't matter, domestic, are bitter, and the acids aren't good, and so you're not left with a pleasant aftertaste.
It's a balance in the acidity. We need to have higher malic acid that is not a kind of bitter acid, like tartaric acid, and everything is balance, and acidity is what we have to balance more.
It's interesting. I'm fascinated by this conversation. I appreciate the insight, because Prosecco, for sure, I still think it's misunderstood a little bit in Southern California anyway, and I want to bring these into...
Not only here.
Yeah. I see you wrote here that you use recycled glass. That can't be that easy to do, because...
Yes, that's easy.
It is? Because in California, they don't even take my bottles. They don't like them because they're colored glass. They don't want them.
No, because apart from clear glass, the one that we use mainly for the rosé in order to have the people to check the color.
Yes.
But most of our bottles are very dark colored.
So
and this, beside being very interesting for the protection from the light,
yes,
it's also a kind of glass that you can produce from glass that is
you can
recycled.
Grind it up. It's recycled, and the color
is
irrelevant.
And it costs far less in terms of energy than producing a glass from raw materials.
That's true. Are you aiming toward like the zero carbon footprint concept, or just sustainable?
Yes, so we got a prize from the European Union a few years ago as a winery, for the production of our own energy through solar panel. But we got the prize because we used not the usual solar panel, but something that is called something that you don't see, that is a solar panel.
I see they're gradually replacing conventional roofs with green roofs.
Green roofs, it means that we grow grass on our roof.
Really?
Yes, we have a sort of
Don't give my wife
part.
this idea, please.
And these helps also in areas that are wildly, I say wildly, urbanized. The possibility to, when you have the rain, to release slowly the rain that comes down. And this also helps to prevent flooding.
Wow, it's so interesting because it seems like some of these traditions, I can say traditions, but things that our ancestors and forefathers knew
Yes.
are coming back because they're simpler, they're safer, they're better for the environment, and they actually recycle energy to a certain extent.
Producing a thing like in the past is good, provided that you interpret the old things
Yes, right.
with your modern mind, because we study for something.
Yeah, I agree. That's really. I think that's very interesting. I see you have your panels here, and then I didn't understand that we try as much as possible to use heat pumps and natural gas for heating spaces. So heat pumps are gas
Heat pumps, it means that it extracts the heat
Yes.
from the outside temperature.
Uh-huh.
So, and it's a process that is very energy efficient. Is an electric pump that, let's say, if outside you have 10 degrees centigrade, you take out 2 of these degrees and you pump inside your building.
Wow.
So
I
you
don't
just
know that technology. I just
pump.
put in a bunch
You
of
just
air
pump
conditioners.
in cold air,
Yes.
and you spit out
Little warmer.
colder air,
Oh yeah.
even
the
colder
other,
air,
the other side,
and
because
you
he pulls
recover
it.
the heat that is.
That's really interesting.
Yes.
Tell me about the reception around the world for we know Prosecco. I mean, Champagne has its moniker, particularly above, let's say, the Asian countries. But how is Prosecco, or how's your marketing throughout not only Europe but Asia?
I see from our own position, that is the position of the medium small winery. We export at the moment about half of our production. We are not dependent on big countries. I mean, only on one country, and then the other are just a part.
Yes.
We are spread in about almost 30 countries, from bigger countries like, as a market, we work a lot with the UK, with Japan,
UK,
with
sure.
Australia. The States are growing.
Yes.
We work a lot with almost all European countries, with Russia, with South America, but also in some strange countries like Belize, Mongolia. So
That's interesting. That's really
not
interesting.
that they buy a lot, but
No.
maybe for me a pallet in Belize is almost
That's
like a
pretty-
container in the States. You know.
That's pretty interesting because we were in. I was in New York for they called it the leading wines of the world tasting, which is probably an
Yes.
unfair title.
Yeah.
But there were wineries looking for representation in the United States, so they weren't here yet. And I spent most of my time at the Moldavian table
Yes.
and the Macedonian tables because I never get to taste them. I thought that was really interesting. And they have this. I look at the way wine is marketed throughout the world, and certain cultures are ahead of the curve and they understand a lot of things, and certain cultures are learning new things, and certain cultures consider themselves educated and they continue to expand their palates.
Yes.
And I think that's the difference between the West Coast and the East Coast. We don't buy as much sparkling wine here. We don't buy as much port or fortified wine in the West Coast. You go on the East Coast and it's, I went to a restaurant the other night and it was the most granular, district-specific wine list I'd ever experienced.
In New York City?
Yeah,
Where was this?
it was in a
Yeah?
restaurant, and I could barely understand what the stuff
Where
was.
it's from?
Yeah, and a lot of it was Burgundy, but such small districts and appellations and makers that I was like having a hard time. Thank goodness I stumbled across a couple I knew and was able to pull off.
Help navigate.
Because isn't it hard to be the wine guy at the dinner table because they always expect the best, they want you to pick a good one.
Yeah. You
Yes,
have to know everything, every
yeah.
region,
But
every village.
People tend to be quite conservative in wine. I think because most of us that are considered wine connoisseur tend to complicate the thing that wine is.
I agree.
And the wine is something should be easy in my opinion. And you shouldn't be afraid of trying a new wine. Always be open to a new wine. My motto as a winemaker is that the conscious winemaker drinks other winemakers' wine.
That's a very good
point. And when I open a wine list, I always check for something that I never tasted. Of course, if I find something that I like and I really liked, maybe I drink another time or another 2 or 3 times. It's not a problem for me. But I'm quite curious about this. And what is strange is that in a country like in a state like California, where you are a big producer of wine, you should be more open than in another state.
I absolutely agree
and
with
especially
you.
The climate here is perfect for Prosecco.
You're wrong. Yeah, exactly. Well, last night Umberto brought over a Nebbiolo, and I'm like, oh, you brought an Italian Nebbiolo to try. He's like, no, this is from California.
I was curious about tasting it. I saw it in a store that I visited.
Palmina?
Yeah.
I've tasted a lot of Nebbiolo.
It was a 2010 he found somewhere in a store.
This guy knows how to shop.
Yeah, he always brings over.
I was curious.
Well, okay, I'm glad you brought that up because it's not new for me, but it's something I've been trying to. It's why this club exists, right?
Yes, I was thinking that you are doing really a good job in making people know what wine is.
It's a hard balance. Because I know what's going to sell. I know the palates of my customers, and I know that if I buy a particular Merlot from California, I'm going to sell it, even though I may not find it that interesting, though good. So the premise is, as well as it should be for a good wine list at a restaurant, that at least we know that it's been curated and that the wine connoisseur, and that the wine sommelier or the guy like me, the cellarmaster, has taken out all the bad stuff and now representing from these areas the good things. So this Prosecco that you make, if I put a Prosecco on my list, at least the consumer knows this is a good example of that Prosecco. I'm not running the risk of choosing a bad wine.
Yeah.
I'm just choosing a different wine, right? Because I don't, and I have to say this with a political neutrality here, because it takes a long time for the consumer to understand the value of tasting different things and appreciating different things.
Yes.
Certainly a Barbaresco is going to taste a lot different than a Napa Cab. And if I drink Napa Cabs, I'm prone to say when I drink a Barbaresco, this isn't that good, right? Because it's so different.
Yes.
But if you can turn your head a little bit and say, okay, what is this? It's a grape from a Piemonte, this is the character it should have, and appreciate what that's supposed to be, then the passion of wine really starts to become obvious to an individual, in my opinion. It's hard to do, though. It's very hard to do.
I would say that you have to try.
Just try, right?
Just switching to food.
Good.
It's easier for somebody to understand if we don't speak only of wine.
Right.
I think that everybody is able to understand if a meat is good or not.
That's right.
And the same should be for wine. And you have not to be afraid to taste a new food, something new. I told my son and my daughter when they were really young that everything that was on the table they have to taste. They can say, I don't like it, but you taste.
You taste it.
I think that everything now that they are 20 over is easier for them to approach also different culture because they taste.
That's
at
true.
Least.
They're experimented.
You're allowed to say that you don't like it.
You don't have to like it, right?
But not as something that you never tasted. You don't know.
Don't you want to learn to appreciate? Again, like same thing with the wine. As long as you know the chef is a good chef and he's presenting that food that you're trying to taste in his best light, then you can do it. My wife, who's downstairs, her cousin owns a restaurant in Pasadena, an Italian restaurant, and he told us 2 nights ago he's starting to change the menu, and he's going to get rid of her dish. It's her dish. It's all she ever gets when she goes there. It's the same. He always comes to the table and says, "Why did you get that again? You're not allowed to get that anymore because I'm taking it off the list." And she was petrified by this because she had to try something else. And I do the same thing, right? We're creatures of habit sometimes. Yes. And I think your food analogy is a great one because we should try different foods. We should.
Yes.
And so, what would be the foods of the Prosecco? I know the Veneto. We're going to be above the Veneto, above Venice. What is there a traditional food of that area?
Yes, you know that every single part, I think, of the world has some traditional food.
Yes.
Our cuisine is mainly based for the normal day on risotto, on vegetables, on this kind of stuff, some fish coming from the Adriatic Sea.
Sure, right.
And so these are, I think that wine and food develops together. So
I agree with that.
and this
Finally.
is something that.
So why don't you talk about your risotto?
I've been preaching this forever.
So
Umberto makes a very simple
nothing bad
risotto
that,
with
but
this-
even making a risotto with some Parmigiano is perfect with
Perfect.
some
Simple,
wine. Yes,
easy.
simple. Some vegetables in the spring, some fish when you go to the Adriatic to fish some fish, and then you come back.
Beautiful.
Yes.
I
And
have been saying this forever.
And another thing that we use a lot are fresh cheeses made also from goat.
So goat cheese.
Goat cheese,
Softer.
as well as, of course, all our kind of prosciutto and this kind of stuff. Because nothing is best than
But you're-
sitting outside with a nice bottle of cold Prosecco, dry, I mean, brut,
Yes.
with some prosciutto
But
and
isn't
some
like
cheese.
even amongst Italian villages, the prosciutto is different from down the street, down the village, across. Say you go across Tuscany and you go to the different small villages. Each one has its own sort of
Yes.
version of those things, right? I had this conversation with a famous Burgundy maker, and he had a very interesting outlook on this. And I've said this a few times, but you have that luxury in Italy and most of Europe where these grapes were growing here and we started to make them and the foods kind of evolved with that, and certainly they belong together, and that's what happened. America's not like that. All we have is Concord grape. You make jelly out of that, right? Those are the wine grapes we have. So our cuisine is born of experimenting with wines that we have here. So
Yes.
California cuisine is different, and it's and he put it this way. He says it's a new energy, it's a new life, it's a new world cuisine that you were. And I looked at it as a negative thing that we didn't have this culture to grow up in, and he was saying no, it's a great thing because
It's
you
a
get a
great
chance
thing.
to
Yes, he's right.
test.
He's right, because you can experiment, and I think that nothing lasts forever. Tradition is made is an evolution.
Yes,
Tradition is evolution. Tradition is not something that remains set forever.
It's a great point.
Tradition always is an evolution.
Changes. Well, we're gonna wrap this up in a minute, but I wanted to. You're up by Bolzano.
Yes.
And up by the Dolomites, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
We are nearby to the Dolomites.
Yes.
Half an hour we are in the Dolomites.
And I was fascinated. We were there. First of all, there's a lot of pears up there. No, is that part of the area? Pear, the fruit.
Yes, in the Alto Adige they
Yes.
have a lot of, especially apples.
Yes.
Lot of apples.
My
pears.
wife would not. I tried to pull over and pick. She's, we're in a foreign country. You can't do that.
Just
They're gonna
steal, take some apples.
I just wanted a pear. But what was interesting, we were talking about the cuisine, that's why I brought it up. When we got closer into Bolzano, which now is the border, the cuisine was clearly a melding of Germanic cuisine and
Definitely,
Italian.
definitely.
So it's like schnitzel and salami, and schnitzel and pizza. And I thought that was fascinating. So we'd go. I was loving this opportunity to experiment. And geographically, we know we're in a place where this is what it's going to be, right? It's transitioning as it heads down. So it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. And I'm going to call you Doctor. Dr.
No, Umberto, that's it. The doctor is my physician.
I hope you have a pleasant trip on the way back. And I know you're going to Canada after this, which is interesting.
I'm going to
part of
Western Canada, yes.
You're already in the east of Canada already, right? You're in Quebec.
Yes, we sell a little bit in Quebec and Ontario.
Amazing. That's amazing. I didn't know even the Ontario people knew all this. But it's been a pleasure having you here. We look forward to seeing you again next time you're here, and we're going to bring some Prosecco in, and we're going to use them during the holidays.
Okay.
I sell quite a bit during the holidays.
I hope to see you and all the people who are hearing this in our area. and we always welcome visitors, and we will be happy to show how we produce our wines.
Yeah, I was looking in the brochure for the guest quarters. You know, my room. Where's my room in this place? No, I'm
It's
kidding.
a separate. He has a whole separate brochure for that.
Yes.
Thank you again. Cheers.
Thank you.
Great having you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Paul.